The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Operation Royal Flush, a high-stakes poker game that was originally rigged. The FBI said several members of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese crime families were involved. X-ray tables, hidden cameras, tampered shuffling machines. No. This is not an episode of The Sopranos. This is the NBA in 2025, and the tentacles of this are reaching out far and wide, and who knows who else is going to be swept up in this. We have a couple of prominent names involved right now. Who knows where this is going to go? You know, it's a slippery slope once you get involved in gambling. Now, that's not to say that legalized gambling has led to this. I mean, that's a quick reflex on that. If you say, oh, well, yeah, of course, if you start to introduce legalized gambling into sports, it's going to lead to this kind of thing. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily on that. I was told many years ago by lobbyists for the Gaming Association that if you went to legalize gambling in sports, that these kind of things would be flagged. So while we're finding out about it now and thinking, oh, my God, look at this, these kind of things may have been going on unchecked for a long time. And what happens with legalized gambling is when there are an inordinate amount of money, inordinate amount of bets placed on a particular player who's not, very high profile or kind of a run-of-the-mill Thursday night game, which doesn't involve, like Golden State or the Lakers, that it gets flagged and people begin to investigate it, and that's what it's led to. But this is a mess right now for not just the NBA, but for all sports. And although I think the gaming lobbyist was correct in telling me this about 20 years ago, that these kind of things would get flagged more often, I also believe that the appearance of this is just a bad optic for sports leagues, because the reflex is to say, oh, they're pounding DraftKings, and all these different betting sites down our throats all the time, telling us to bet on games. ESPN, while they're reporting on the news of the day, is bringing on various so-called betting experts to tell you how to bet. There's Bet ESPN. There are casinos. There are sports books in many venues, including ones here at Northwest Stadium and the one downtown at the Capital One Arena. Those things are everywhere, and you can bet on your phone at any time. But those are legalized things, and those things are tracked. And when you track this kind of betting, then it leads you to, when there are these kind of things going on, that inside information is being passed along, that you have these incredible high-stakes poker games involving Chauncey Billups, allegedly, that you're going to find out about it. Now, it's important to recognize what the FBI said yesterday. It was about two separate investigations that kind of overlap, if you can follow along here. There is the one called Nothing But Net, and that involves NBA players or people who are involved with teams passing along information like, oh, yeah, LeBron's listed as questionable, but he's not going to play tonight. So you bet on the Lakers to lose. And then there's Operation Royal Flush, which is the most mind-blowing of all. This poker game, which Chauncey Billups allegedly was used to bring in unsuspecting players for games that were rigged, that you even had like these special contact lenses that some of the players were wearing that would allow you to see the cards. I mean, just unbelievable amounts of technology that went into this, and the FBI says that victims were defrauded out of over $7 million, and a game that Chauncey Billups was allegedly involved in cost one at least $50,000. David Purdom is a gambling expert, works for ESPN, does a lot of stories about that. He was on our morning show on Sportsmanlike yesterday and explained the sting that led to the arrest yesterday of Portland Trailblazers coach Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier, guard for the Miami Heat.
Terry Rozier had been under investigation for a long time, dating back to a 2023 game where some suspicious betting occurred on his player props. It was when he was with the Charlotte Hornets. They were playing the New Orleans Pelicans. All this money started showing up on the under on his rebounds, assists, and points before that game. He took himself out of that game 10 minutes into it, citing a foot injury. Sportsbooks flagged that suspicious activity. Seeing what happened, the NBA investigated initially and found no wrongdoing, but the FBI has continued to investigate Rozier's implication in that investigation. And that's where we got today, where he was arrested in a hotel in Orlando as part of this gambling probe. Billups does seem to be separate, but also tied with some of the same people that were involved. This all goes back to the Jontay Porter case from 2024. Jontay Porter, of course, former Toronto Raptor, who was banned and admitted in court that he manipulated his performance as part of a gambling scheme.
David, how does the league's involvement with betting companies not become a conflict of interest when it comes to these types of instances of malfeasance when it comes to sports gambling?
You know, Commissioner Silver was on our network just on Tuesday and spoke about some of his concerns about the sports betting market and the sports betting industry. He is concerned that these player prop bets, where you can bet on almost anything, any player, any statistic, kind of opens up opportunities for manipulation. And so he's definitely concerned about their relationship. They're always going to be part of the business because they believe it gives them more transparency and communication with the sportsbooks. So when something untoward pops up, they have a direct line of communications and can get directly to it.
Well, David, I'm curious if you know this. How thoroughly are these leagues, the NBA and other professional sports leagues, being probed to make sure that they are on top of this illegal gambling activity?
Yeah, they're working with several companies that monitor the betting market. You know, you can kind of look for the lines and see when unusual activity comes in. The Jontay Porter case that we mentioned, obviously he was not a high-profile player, and so when all these big bets started showing up on the under on his statistics and then he was removed from the game after playing only a few minutes, it stood out. And so that is part of what a lot of people think the benefits of a regulated sports betting market. If that were to have happened in the offshore bookmaker market or with your local bookie on the corner, we may have never heard about it. So the visibility that this is coming with from the regulation is kind of thing or pro. The con is, are we offering these giant betting menus that almost, provide these opportunities from these low-profile players where people can try to take advantage of it?
Yeah, and for those guys, you can get them for X amount of dollars. You can't, get LeBron to throw a game, obviously. It's just they just make too much money. But what we're finding, and we didn't really think this at the time, but it's looking more and more like that is becoming true, especially on these prop bets, that you can get these lower-level players to agree to say, oh, my knee hurts, my ankle hurts, I got to come out of the game, when they bet heavy on the under for statistics for the game, that you play only 7 or 8 minutes instead of the 22 or 23 that you're supposed to play, and maybe you get those stats. So that is something that they've got to get their arms around. I don't know if they can fully eliminate prop bets, because I think that's a big part of the business plan for these betting sites, that they get more people in the tent rather than just betting on games with the point spread. I think that you want to have, if you're running a DraftKings, you want to have that. You want to be able to bring more people in to do and bet on those kind of things. Now, as Purda mentioned there, it's two separate things. It's Chauncey Billups, yes, caught up in this high-stakes poker thing with the X-ray machines and the tampered shuffling card machines and the Genovese crime families and all that stuff. That's a big part of his arrest, but it also spills over to what they call nothing but net, which is inside information being passed along as to who's going to play and whether games are being tanked and so forth and so on. So Brian Windhorst, who covers the NBA, was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday and explained, yes, it's Chauncey Billups involved allegedly in these high-stakes poker games, but it also spills over to the inside information piece of this operation of point spreads, and also involved in over-under on prop bets for players.
What Chauncey is being accused of is, there was a tanking job going on because people were really interested in getting their hands on Victor Wembanyama. And the Blazers weren't participating in that tanking situation. And there was a moment in March of that year where the Blazers basically seemed to have decided to put their tank in overdrive. And they decided they were not going to play their regulars anymore, but specifically they were not going to play Dame Lillard. And there was this day, I can't remember who they were playing, maybe the Jazz. But Damian was listed as probable with a calf tightness. And according to the indictment, I'm not saying it happened, I just said according to the indictment, Chauncey told somebody that Dame wasn't going to play amongst other players, even though he was listed as probable. As the day went along, he was then switched to questionable and then out, and then he never played again the rest of the season. And the Blazers lost 15 of their last 17 games and ended up with Scoot Henderson, the number 2 pick, but not the number 1 pick.
Yeah. So, there was a little bit of engineering going on there and inside information being passed along. There's another name that's involved in this investigation, and it is a less prominent name. It's Damian Jones, who was a journeyman NBA player, wound up on the coaching staff of the Cavaliers from 2016 to 2018, and was also, I don't know if they use the word volunteer. I don't know how you could have that in the NBA, but he was an unofficial assistant with the Lakers, and he reportedly has gone bankrupt, so he needed the cash, and he was with the team in the 22-23 season and passing along information about the availability of LeBron James, which is illegal. You can't do that. That's inside information that you just can't do as a coach. And he was getting paid for that by the gamblers, and so that's another name that's being swept up in this. Not as prominent as the other two. This is another interesting angle on this. Steve Kerr, coach of the Warriors, and you've heard players who have gotten heckles from fans about bad prop bets that they made and so forth. This is Kerr discussing last night with reporters about how this has spilled over to the players and to himself.
The biggest thing is that our players face a lot of wrath of fans. I know I've talked to our guys. Our guys get nasty social media posts from people who have bet on games, and that's the thing that I don't like, about this the most. I mean, just, our players should not have to deal with that, but they do. They probably would anyway, even if we didn't have a partnership with these companies. So it's just kind of the modern life, social media, everyone having access to everyone else. And, it's rough. I mean, I feel bad for our guys. I've gotten some emails in the past, from people I don't know saying, hey, thanks a lot. I had money on the game tonight, and you screwed up by subbing so-and-so in or something like that. And, I've gotten those too. It's weird.
So where does this go? And this is not new. Remember Denny McClain when he was pitching for the Detroit Tigers, and at the top of his game, he won 31 games in 1968. Was not effective in that World Series. Mickey Lolich won 3 games for the Tigers that year. McClain, who was basically unhittable during the regular season with 31 wins, was not as good. And there was a story that Denny was heavily involved in gambling. Well, that's not a story. That's facts. But the story goes prior to the World Series that the gamblers came to collect their debts. Denny didn't have the money, and one of them stepped on his foot and at least severely bruised it and hampered him in pitching. So that's going back to 1968, and that's illegal gambling. This is legal gambling, though it's now fuzzy with this, illegal insider information being passed along, and the other piece of it with with Chauncey Billups allegedly involved in this high-stakes poker game with the mob and cards that were fixed and so forth, and they just used him as what they call a face card, his face to lure in these gamblers. Hey, Chauncey Billups is participating in this game. You can too. It looks to be above board. These are not just mafioso people involved in this. So what does the NBA do about this? What do they do moving forward? Haven't heard from Adam Silver yet. And not all of this is new because they have had investigations in the past, including Rozier. They didn't find enough to charge him with anything, and was, at least until the other night, was on the roster of the Miami Heat. He's now been, suspended as Billups is. But what did they do to get their arms around this? This was Windhorst yesterday with Rich Eisen.
So what the NBA is going to have to deal with here is obviously players with pulling themselves out of games with unders. But we frankly have known about that, unfortunately, for 18 months. That's the Jaunte Porter thing from 18 months ago. The thing that the NBA is going to have to deal with, and they already have dealt with in a certain extent, Rich, is that for decades, there's been this soft spot where people involved with the team, whether it's the players or the other people, support staff, know well before the injury list is changed that a player is going to play. So let's just say you have an average Thursday in November. There's a shoot-around in the morning. A player is listed as questionable. Everybody at that shoot-around sees that player can't walk, okay? He's still listed as questionable, even though everybody knows he's not playing that night. That has happened for decades, and there have been people who could have passed that information on. Now, since sports betting became legal, the NBA, they recognize that this is a soft spot, and so they very vastly tightened their injury reporting. They now do injury updates all during the day, and they fine teams if they don't accurately tell injury situations. But that said, there is still this soft spot, largely in some cases because the teams don't want to let their opponents know who's going to be playing. And also, sometimes it's genuinely a game time decision. Sometimes you don't know whether a player is going to be able to play until he gets out there and warms up. And how does that calf feel? How does that, wrist feel? And so, but there's this gray area there. And so what I suspect will happen out of this, I don't think that this is something that is a scandal that is going to rock the foundation of the league. I mean, I'm sure that some people will get on television and say that. This is a problem that the NBA has known about and has been trying to address. There are instances now where it's coming out that people are exploiting it. But they were going to probably have to tighten it up even more and pressure teams more to be more honest about player availability so that a volunteer assistant coach or anybody else may not be able to give inside information, that the information is much more transparent.
Okay, and Windhorst knows much more about the NBA than I'll ever know. But I would say this, there's the perception of this, and the perception is not good. Are people going to stop going to games and stop watching on television? Probably not. But getting people to realize that your product is not fixed is going to be hard to do because of all of this. And this goes back, to the Donaghy investigation 12, 15 years ago, where there was an official who was betting on games and kicked out of the league, went to jail for that. And then there's this angle on it, too. David Purdom, the gambling expert who writes for ESPN, was asked on the morning show yesterday on Sportsmanlike, well, what about federal oversight on this?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Commissioner Silver has his preference is that we get some sort of federal oversight over the sports betting market. Right now, it's done by state, where you have individual state gaming regulators putting up their own regulations and their own rules, and those rules vary state by state. So what you get is this kind of patchwork of regulations, and Commissioner Silver believes that maybe if we got a federal oversight where everything is uniform, that would be better for the industry overall, both sports and the sports betting industry.
David, what does this do for the messaging that the NBA is going to have to put forth? Is it a good thing that they are on top of this and that if anyone crosses that line, they are going to find it out and act accordingly? Or is this a bad thing for the NBA, especially 2 days into the season, to have an active player and head coach be involved in this?
Yeah, it's certainly not a good thing from the optics The other side of things, as I mentioned, that hopefully this transparency that we're getting from the regulated market will show bad actors that, hey, if you try to pull something, we're watching, we're going to see it, and we're going to find out eventually. So there's kind of a give and take there. There is an academic theory called the adaptation theory. And that means any time that society, something that is taboo in the past, is brought up into a regulated environment, such as sports betting. Sports betting was basically unregulated outside of Nevada for a long time. But now it comes up into the regulated environment, and people have a time to adjust to it. So we're kind of in that adjustment period. People will start to see that, hey, this is what we can and cannot do, and that's the hope that eventually this kind of stuff gets snuffed out.
Okay, well, it's the hope, and if you think that the leagues are going to get away from gambling, forget it. There's just too much money coming in. They may have resisted it for a while, particularly the NFL, which said, oh, no, we can't do that. Yeah, well, Pete Rozelle understood this over 50 years ago when the NFL Today added Jimmy the Greek. And the only thing that Rozelle said was you can't give point spreads. So the Greek had his checklist. And if there were a bunch of checks on the side of one team, to bet the team and give the points. And so that has gone on for a long time. But now that you have legalized gambling, and as I was told many years ago, once you have that, things like this will get flagged. We're finding out about it and what they can do to get their arms around it. Who knows? We can go all day on this. I've had enough. Maybe you've had enough. We'll get to what's going on with the Commanders. And there is some hopeful signs coming out of Ashburn, though they are still enormous underdogs going into Kansas City on Monday night. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
One more word on this NBA gambling scandal, among the many things said last night about it on the Inside the NBA show, which is now on ESPN. Shaquille O'Neal said, I know Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones very well. I'm ashamed that those guys would put their families and careers in jeopardy. If you're making $9 million a year, how much more do you need? That is a clear misunderstanding of gambling. It has nothing to do with how much money you have or don't have. People who are addicted to gambling are addicted to the action. They like the action of gambling. Sometimes when they win, they don't even care. They just want to be involved in the thrill of that. And if you're Chauncey Billups and you're making $9 million, and maybe that's what he makes as coach of the Trailblazers, I don't know. You don't think of it as added income in gambling. It just doesn't work that way. And Shaq can't be that naive, really. I mean, he's been around the NBA for a long, long time as a player and as an analyst, and he really believes this was about trying to increase your income if you're making $9 million a year. It's never really about that. It wasn't about that for Pete Rose. Pete Rose loved the action. He was an action junkie, and that's why he got involved in gambling. One time, he was the highest paid player in baseball. He was making like $750,000 a year when a lot of guys were making like $75,000 a year. I mean, it was just crazy. He was making 10 times more than many of his teammates. And he just loved the action. And so that's what really this is all about. Chauncey Billups made over $100 million playing in his career. I don't know how much of that is gone with gambling. Gamblers don't usually. There are some, I guess, who make a good living at it. But those big hotels in Vegas, they weren't built because people go in the casinos and win. Keep that in mind. All right. This was not a suspenseful thing yesterday in Ashburn, but the question had to be asked after all the reporting that had been done the day before that Jaden Daniels is not going to play on Monday night in Kansas City. So for the purposes of making it official, that question was asked to Dan Quinn yesterday.
He will be out this week, and Marcus will start. I'd said, I think, it was Monday, I'm getting my days mixed up, but we knew it wasn't going to be significant, meaning long, but also not well enough to say, okay, in 6 days, it's ready to go based on speed and how you would, handle this type of injury. So all of the week will be focused for him on the rehab in hopes of the following week. And so I'll assess that next week, but as opposed to some practice, some not, just put all of it, all the time and effort into that.
And with Jaden, I know it's been different injuries, different legs, not necessarily related to one another, but is there anything that you think you guys can learn from his injury so far, or does it just kind of feel like a nature of having bad luck so far?
From the first one, we tried to learn quite a bit to make sure there couldn't be a specific hit that could be avoided. When you're outside the pocket, when can you remain a passer? When can you run? And so that's true for any quarterback that has, the ability to scramble and turn plays into big ones. We're facing one this Monday night, similar in that way, to extend plays and when to remain a passer, when he runs. And so that was the big lesson and takeaway for me on that.
Now, keep in mind, he was knocked out of the game on Sunday in Dallas in the pocket. He was throwing in the pocket. Now, Quinn did say that it may have appeared that he hurt his hamstring prior to the play but wasn't limping. They would like him to, protect himself, obviously, but they don't want to say you can't run because that's what makes him him. But Marcus Mariota will get the start, and he's been there, done that with this team, and so far he's started 2 games this year, lost one, kind of an ugly game in Atlanta, and then won a big one on the road against the Chargers, who won big last night against Minnesota. And so he was asked yesterday about preparing for this. He's been both a starter and a backup during his career, and knowing now fairly early in the week, sometimes it's a game time decision on the starting quarterback, and you got to prepare as if you're going to play, and other times the quarterback's healthy and at least you're not going to start the game. Knowing you're going to start, has that changed anything for him this week?
Honestly, for me, it doesn't change a whole lot. I really try to prepare like I'm the starter every week, and I try to do all the mental reps. Now more so I'm getting just more physical reps than I am the mental part of it, but I try not to change my process through the week just because I feel like as long as I got my process, I can lean on that whether I'm playing or not. And it's worked well for me over the course of the last couple of years, just being around Cliff and Tavita and the rest of the offensive staff. Like, I feel really confident in the way that we prepare, and I just go about it the same way.
Okay, so it looks like he's going to have at least 2 receivers that have been out. Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel both practiced fully yesterday, so that's a good sign. Now, as far as preparing in this type of situation, interesting stuff from Jason Garrett yesterday, now an analyst with NBC. He was on the Dan Patrick Show, and as you remember, he was a backup quarterback to Troy Aikman in Dallas, and I thought he had a really good analysis of what it's like for a backup quarterback to get ready for a game.
I was the third quarterback there for a while, but I was also the backup there too. And you just don't get reps. The starters get the reps. You get the scout team stuff. Maybe you get a little something. Different coaches will give you 10 plays on Friday, or they'll give you 2 plays at the end of a 20-play set or whatever. But, I learned early on, I would complain to myself, like, how am I supposed to play well? I never get any reps. And then you realize that, if you can't function in this environment, they're going to find someone who can. So you better develop a relief pitcher mentality, and you better figure out how to do it. And so the way I did it was you spend so much time watching film, so much time knowing the plan inside and out. I would drive around. When I'd be driving home, I'd turn the radio off and I'd call plays out loud, right? I mean, literally, you do everything you can to create reps for yourself, to get yourself ready to go. And, I'd throw after practice, and you're always doing stuff because you're standing on the sideline, and I would used to call the plays in, and the quarterback gets hurt, and you put the headset down, and it's like, okay, you go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. But the question is, do those 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 reps during the week, is that what allows you to play well? Is it better to have the guy who's playing all those snaps anyway take those, and then you just have to have a relief pitcher's mentality to go in and function? And, so it's a tricky thing, but, Troy Aikman, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer, he got all the reps. And so I think if you're Dylan Gabriel, he probably deserves all the reps too, because he's got a lot of catching up to do.
All right, give me a for instance. You're driving home, you turn off the radio, and then what are you yelling out?
Yeah, I mean, literally, you're saying out loud, okay, this is bunch right motor, scout right 525 up post, right? I mean, that's what you're saying. And
can you imagine being in the car next to you And they're watching you
I
shouting it
can't tell you
out, hand signals, the whole thing.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times it happened. Like, what is this guy doing? But you have to steal reps any way you can. And one thing, a little bit of a different topic. When I became the head coach in Dallas, there was this virtual reality thing that became available to us, and we had it for a while. And the reason we had it was probably because of my experience as a backup quarterback, never getting reps. And we created a virtual reality room where backup quarterbacks could go in there and go through. Essentially, they were hearing the play from the coach, going to the line of scrimmage. You could look left, you could look right. There's Des Bryant over here. Here's Jason Witten. I mean, it was a real thing. And for me, I thought it was invaluable. Not for the starter. The starter's getting all those reps, but the guy who doesn't get the work. And I know Jaden Daniels has done a lot of work with this, but I think that's a real thing, and that's something that can really help people going forward.
Wait a minute. So I go into a room, do I have to put on glasses?
You do.
And I'm now the defense isn't going to hit me, but how are they moving so I know where I'm going to, like my hot receiver, going through progressions? How much time do I have to do this?
Well, we had all these crazy cameras at practice. And these 360-degree cameras that they made up, and you would have it like 15 yards behind the ball, and everybody, you had to stay away from the camera. But literally, you would hear the offensive coordinator call the play, go in the huddle, walk up to the line, and you could do this and this with these headsets on, and literally, there's Des Bryant. It's not an image of Des Bryant, that's him right there. And you see the safety creeping down, and you see the strong dog pressure coming over here. And to me, I would go in there afterwards. I'm like, this is incredible. I mean, I love the idea of it because, like I said, I was the guy that was on the highway calling out the plays, right? So I think it's the wave of the future myself.
I didn't realize that they had it back when Garrett played. He's been in the league 15 years or more, right? But yeah, you've heard Jaden Daniels uses it. I've seen this virtual reality. It's a pretty cool thing, pretty amazing. But, one of the things that they said about Caleb Williams was the Bears had considered buying it for him, but they didn't think he would use it. Now, Caleb's starting to come around. The Bears have won 4 straight. They are underdogs going to Baltimore on Sunday. But just sort of an interesting angle on that. And Jaden has obviously been successful using it. All right, more from Garrett, and this was the second part of the conversation. It's about the Chiefs, who the Commanders are going to face on Monday night. And as they started off the year 0-2, people went, oh, my God, it's all over for them. And now they look like the Chiefs again.
Well, we talk about this every week on Football Night in America. And when the Chiefs are struggling early on, everyone starts to get down on them. That's the kind of world we live in. And my response always is, have you guys been watching for the last decade? Has anybody been watching this? I mean, this team is historic. The coach is incredible. The quarterback's incredible. The defense, they have these Hall of Fame players. So to me, it was just a matter of, they had some question marks on the offensive line. They're still working through that. It's better the last couple of weeks. But, getting their guys back, I think that's a big thing. And Rashee Rice, a couple of years ago, I'll never forget this. I did the playoff game between Miami and Kansas City, the freezing cold game up there in Kansas City. And if you remember, Kansas City got shellacked. I think it was Christmas Day against the Raiders. They were terrible.
Yeah.
And it almost looked to me the following week that they said, okay, here's who we can trust. I can trust Mahomes. I can trust Kelsey. I can trust Pacheco. And we can trust Rashee Rice. Those are the only guys getting it. And that's what they did. That's what they did in the playoffs, and they went all the way to the Super Bowl, kind of taking that approach. So it was like they sat down together and said, this is the approach we need to take. This is how we're going to win. And I feel like they've done that again. And when they get these pieces back, when Rashee Rice comes back, all of a sudden Hollywood Brown is a secondary player. Travis Kelsey is a secondary player. Gray is a secondary or a third player for them. And so you get them back into their slots, and now they're really hard to stop because Rashee Rice can handle the burden. And they did a great job getting him acclimated last week.
Yeah, so wrong time for the Commanders to be playing them. They're hitting on all cylinders now, and Jaden Daniels isn't going to play. Marcus Mariota has played in Kansas City before, and he is welcoming the challenge.
I love playing there. It's such a fun atmosphere. The fans are great. It's loud. And I truly enjoy it. And at the end of the day, like, it's going to come down to us being able to communicate. It is a tough environment. But at the same time, like, that's what you play for. You love these moments. You love these atmospheres. And I'm really looking forward to it.
And Marcus, just a quick piggyback off of that. You've had some success playing at Arrowhead. What's allowed for you to be successful there, and what do you love about it?
First and foremost, I just love the atmosphere. It reminds me a lot of college. I love playing on the road. I think kind of that us versus everybody mentality is something that I really feel like I've thrived on in my career. But I love playing at Arrowhead. I actually have family there, so I do get to see some family. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it is a tough place to play. But as long as you get everybody going on the same page and you're communicating, it allows you to be able to execute and do what you need to do.
So Mariota it is on Monday night in Kansas City. Commanders 12.5-point underdogs for this game. It's a murderer's row coming up. They got this game and then 2 home games, but they're against Seattle and Detroit. And you got to think, if they don't win at least one of these next 3, in the NFL, I guess it's never too early to say it's over. Never too early to say it's over, never too late, whatever it is. If they get to 3-7, are they done? Not necessarily, but realistically, they might be. So getting at least one of these next 3 is going to be big, and it would be an absolutely enormous upset if they can go into Kansas City and win. But we've seen it happen before. It's the NFL. That's the way things roll. All right, coming up, we'll deal more with the game for the Commanders as they go to Kansas City on Monday night, and we've got Ravens preview coming up at 10:30 as the Ravens look to right the ship at 1-5. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. With all due respect to the late David Bowie, changes apparently not coming to the Commanders' defense, at least not the big ones that we were speculating about, such as, will they make a change at defensive coordinator? Will Dan Quinn call the defensive plays? Will they make major changes in the secondary or other parts of the defense? Doesn't sound that way, but you can hear what Dan Quinn had to say about it yesterday and other things as they get ready for a Monday night game in Kansas City. A lot of primetime stuff for a team that doesn't appear ready for primetime this year, unfortunately. They had the national game late Sunday afternoon. They had the Monday night game against the Bears. They lost those, and they hope not to make it 3 straight losses on Monday night in Kansas City, but they are 12.5-point underdogs in that game. Dan Quinn yesterday talking to the media, usually does a Wednesday appearance, but because of the Monday night game, everything gets moved up, so he did it on Thursday. And he had said in his Monday news conference that he was going to look at everything and would examine, possible changes. That could be something relatively minor, like Joe Witt coming down to the sidelines instead of calling the plays from the press box. Could it be major lineup changes? There's really not much they can do because of all the injuries they've had. Could it be Quinn calling the defensive signals? Could they change the way they run the defense? I don't know what you do. You go to a 3-4 instead of a 4-3 or whatever. But when asked about the changes yesterday, didn't sound like there's much in the offing. Okay, what do we got here? Here it is. Here's Dan Quinn yesterday.
I think what you'll see is improved play. I think that's obvious that we want to dig in. So when we wanted to look and assess to where we needed to make change and make adjustments, sometimes they're not these big overhauls, John, that make the major improvement. It's these small calibrations and adjustments, and so that is definitely underway. As we get out to practice today, I'm looking forward to seeing the speed. We're trying to eliminate the hesitation, and we will do that.
And when you look kind of as upset as we've seen you after a game the other day. So when you have a game like that, feeling like that, what do you do different this week? Did you dig into more of the defense than you normally would, or other side or other things than you normally would because of how that feeling?
Yeah, you you wanted to dig in as hard as you can, and that's my job, to help solve problems and make sure we're playing like that identity like we like. So I absolutely did, to go back through and 7 games and find out, what did we like, what do we need to do differently, what needed to change, and it was a good process to go through. But the result has to be, on the field, and less hesitation, which increases speed, which increases our ability to go run and hit, and that's the objective.
And one of the things he said was they were going to eliminate plays or defensive formations where they had to think more. I guess that's really what he's saying there is hesitation decreases speed. Yeah, what am I going to do in this play? If you know what you're going to do right away, it's going to help you. Now, this came up with Bobby Wagner a few weeks ago, and Joe Witt said, oh, yeah, I'd rather have these experienced guys who know what to do and go and do it, don't have to think about it. Well, I think we're starting to see the slowdown of Bobby Wagner finally at age 35, and he has been a liability at times in the passing game out of the backfield. So we could see a more simpler approach, but it doesn't look like any big changes like removing Witt or Quinn calling plays or any of that stuff is going to happen. Anything we see will be very minor. Now, against a team that can score like Kansas City and has got some healthy players back, who knows? But that was Quinn basically saying, yeah, we talked about maybe making big changes, but we're not making any big changes. This is more from Quinn yesterday, and it's about a feel that's been there for a while this year, that while everything was clicking last year, everything was coming together, they felt almost from the beginning of the year, even though they won their opener against the Giants, that things are just a little bit off.
What I do know, and in visiting with the players too, we felt off, and we wanted to make sure all of us, what did that look like? And it starts, number one, like, man, let's throw a hell of a practice, to go. And when we did talk about from last year to this, what were differences and expectations and those kind of things. But at the end of it, like, it still comes down to, like, the practice, the work, the going for it. And so that's what I know works, and make sure we can all do that together. And so that's where they're at, I'm at. And so the frustration and anger and all those things can turn into the good once you allow all that to work for you in a good way. And otherwise you can feel tight, and when you're tight, you don't just play as fast and as aggressive as you need to. And I want to eliminate that tight. I was talking about earlier about a hesitation, like a misstep. I think all of those things, when you're tighter and one drop pass feels like the game's over, or, a miss here, and that's not it. It's into the next play, into the next moment, and we'll capture that.
Yeah, I think a lot of last year was no expectations. They were playing loose. Hey, nobody expects us to do anything. We got this rookie quarterback, who knows? And then this year, and that, partly because they wind up with all these primetime games that people were expecting them to take the next step forward from going to the NFC Championship game, and it clearly hasn't gone that way. And then, now you've got Marcus Mariota making his third start. The one thing that they have with him, and this probably should be a template for all backup quarterbacks, it's the way that he handles his position and understands that his job, while is to be available for games like this, it's also to help in the development of Jaden Daniels. And I thought he articulated that very well yesterday. This was Mariota talking to the media.
Yeah, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I didn't do a very good job of it when I was in Tennessee. And for me, like, I wanted to be able to provide Jay with just, hey, man, I've been there before. I understand the frustration. And sometimes it's not even just talking. It's just like, bro, I'll sit here all day with you in the locker room and just kind of be there and be a presence for him. So at the end of the day, like, it is tough when you are brought in to be that guy. I think the pressures and the challenges that come with that is a privilege, but it is something that I think is very unique and something that you're maybe not used to. And the more that I can just continue to be there for him and help him through these situations, and even like right now, just kind of getting our guys ready to roll. And hopefully when he gets back, he's ready to roll. There's momentum and we got a spark and we're playing well. So it's just things like that where, hey man, you're not in this alone. and just making sure he understands that. And the more that he can kind of lean into all of us as a team, I think the better he'll feel, the healthier he'll feel, and when he's ready to come back, he'll be good to go.
Yeah, the hope is that he will be ready to go for the Sunday night game, which will be against Seattle. That'll be a week from Sunday, and then they've got Detroit coming to town. Then it's Miami, and it's that game in Barcelona. And you wonder if Mike McDaniel will still be the coach of the Dolphins at that time. In fact, why is the coach of the Dolphins now? That's been an absolute mess in Miami, and Tua Tagovailoa, puts his foot in his mouth all the time, saying things about teammates. The latest is he couldn't find his top receivers because he's too short. I mean, just stuff like that. And McDaniel, who was considered to be quirky when they were winning, is now losing, and he's weird. But he's still the coach, and it looks like things have totally fallen apart there. Ross Tucker, who does a podcast, does a lot of broadcasting, radio, and TV for the NFL, frequently shows up on the Dan Patrick Show, was on the other day, and I thought he had a pretty good explanation as to why he believes that Mike McDaniel, with a team that's sunk, it's not even sinking, it's sunk, why he is still the coach.
There became a few years there, and I want to say it was maybe 2020 to 2023, where owners became very hesitant to fire coaches in season because they were nervous that the interim coach would turn things around and lead the team to a bunch of wins, and that the pressure would then be on them to hire the interim head coach.
Well,
that's
that
the only
happened
logic
with the
right
Raiders a couple of years ago. Didn't it happen with the Raiders?
Raiders, Antonio Pierce. That's exactly right. 2023, they fire McDaniels. Pierce comes in. They have a lot of success, and there's a lot of pressure on Mark Davis to keep him because, remember, a couple years prior to that, he had fired John Gruden middle of the year, gone with Bisaccia, and the Raiders made the playoffs. Yeah. And the Raiders were in the playoffs and almost beat the Bengals in the year the Bengals went to the Super Bowl. He didn't hire Bisaccia. He hired McDaniels. He regretted it, so he felt like he had to give Antonio Pierce that chance. That is what – look, I don't know a single person that thinks Mike McDaniel will be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins in 2026. Not a single person. So, and my guess is Stephen Ross included. So he's electing to not take a chance that he makes Anthony Weaver, the young, well thought of D coordinator, the head coach. Weaver goes on a run. All the players say, we want Weaver, we want Weaver. I don't think Stephen Ross wants to have to deal with that.
That's an interesting angle on that the owner doesn't want to fire the head coach to hire the well-thought-of assistant coach in fear of the assistant coach doing well enough that it would be a bad thing if he had to fire him. I really hadn't thought it out that way. And maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. Maybe at this point where the Dolphins got only one win, what are they, 1-6, 1-5, that maybe you're in full tank mode now, so you don't want to have a coach that's going to come in and win. I don't know. If you're looking at what it's going to do for the season that you make this change, it does nothing if you fire a coach during the season. And I don't know if it necessarily gives you a leg up on hiring the next coach, even though you do it early enough. But that's a thought. Whether you buy it or not, it's a thought that the reason you don't fire Mike McDaniel is the fear that Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator, comes in and does well enough that the players think that he should get the job next year. All right, let's do some college football here. And I have had it with Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly and his act has worn very thin. Comes in, was it 4 years ago with this, hey, look what I did at Notre Dame, and we had all these disadvantages there and the academics and all that, and I took the team to what was the national championship game before they had the playoff, got their doors blown off, of course, by Alabama. But, the feeling was, and I heard Paul Feinbaum say this, Ed Orgeron, if you can win a national championship with Ed Orgeron, you can win a championship with anybody. And Brian Kelly is a hell of a better coach than Ed Orgeron. Well, he's got 2 losses now. He's coming off a loss at Vanderbilt. He is back home tomorrow to play Texas A&M. If he loses that game, is he going to go the way of what has been a wave of big buyouts? And the buyout for Kelly is like $53 million. But, it's LSU. Maybe they're going to be willing to do that. Booger is a former player there, an alum, and he was on PTI yesterday discussing where Brian Kelly and LSU are at this moment.
Brian Kelly, how hot is his seat?
Let me say this, Mike. First and foremost, I was told by a wise man a long time ago, it's a poor dog that won't fight in his own backyard. So we're going to find out just how much fight the LSU Tigers have in Tiger Stadium on Saturday night. But this is maybe the biggest game of Brian Kelly's tenure. Let me explain. Number one, LSU's 5-2 after losing to Vanderbilt. They play Texas A&M at home Saturday night. They got a bye week next, then they go to Alabama. So you're essentially, if you lose Saturday night, you're not going to be favored against Alabama. You could be 5-4 with 3 games left after you told everybody you spent $20 million on a roster. This coming off the fact that Florida has fired Billy Napier. Penn State has paid hundreds of millions to get rid of James Franklin. Like, money doesn't seem to be an object anymore. I just want to know where everybody's getting it from. But this is, I think, the biggest game of the Brian Kelly era so far because of what's at stake, because of the era we're in, and because of the expectations that the LSU fan base, and not only the fan base, but the LSU coach said himself, this is a playoff team. So this is the biggest game of his career so far.
Let's go to a place in your old conference where expectations aren't quite as great. Vanderbilt. I mean, that last year was Indiana, which started ascending in ways that we in the Big Ten are not accustomed to. Now it's Vandy, Booger, playing against Mizzou, which is ranked. Do you have, faith or confidence, or what do you think of Vandy being a guy who used to beat up on Vandy?
Yeah, well, listen, Vandy's a really good team. Can they be a great team and win a college football playoff game or two? I don't know that yet. Now, here's why I say that. Diego Pavia should be in the Heisman Trophy conversation. I've never seen, maybe since Tebow, has a player galvanized a team, a university, and they follow his heartbeat. Like, he is unreal. He wills them to win sometime. Here's the problem. The biggest determining factor in wins and losses in college football is turnovers and explosive plays. Their leading receiver is the tight end. Okay, you got to get some explosive plays down the field to some wide receivers. They've struggled getting those. But, Mike, think about this. If we like Cam Scatterboo in the National Football League, to me, Diego Pavia is the Cam Scatterboo of college football. Like, he'll run over you. He'll throw the football. Like, he can do whatever it takes. And everybody at that university should be proud. Clark Lee, the head coach, has turned him around. This isn't the same old Vandy. And it pains me to say that, especially after they beat LSU last weekend.
I would not have made the comparison between Diego Pavia and Cam Scatterboo, but when you think about it, it does make some sense. It absolutely does make some sense because of the emotion that they bring. And both of them are really fun to watch. I remember watching Scatterboo last year at Arizona State, and you've seen what he's done for the Giants this year. But Pavia, if you haven't seen him play, I mean, whatever he's listed at, he's 3 inches shorter. If they list him at 5'10", he's 5'7". But, man, is he competitive. And does he play hard? And he is so much fun to watch. The Tebow comparison, too, what he brings to the team, I guess you could make the comp that what Tebow brought to Florida. But they're totally different sizes as athletes. Tebow, big, strong guy. Mel Kiper said he should have played tight end in the NFL. He might have been an all-pro. But he wanted to play quarterback, and he's, sort of morphed into this, whatever he is. He's played baseball, he's played football, and he's doing TV now. And maybe he's made more money in the long run than he would have made as an all-pro tight end. Who knows? But the case of Pavia, I don't know what kind of future he's got in the NFL, if any. But in college, he is great to watch. And if you haven't seen him play yet for Vanderbilt, check it out. He is something else. Maybe he's the next Doug Flutie. I don't know. I've heard of his name in the Heisman conversation, but yeah, I would think so. And he has elevated that program. Vanderbilt was a doormat for years. Not anymore. World Series starting tonight. You've got home game now for for Toronto as they open up the World Series against the Dodgers. And we played some of this yesterday. I'm going to play a small portion of it again. Don Mattingly, who I think was a terrific guy to deal with, and a player who, had he not had his career ended early by back issues and other extenuating factors, including that he had sons at home that he wanted to spend time with. But his career ended at 35, and it ended just before the Yankees went on their big World Series run at the end of the 20th century when they won 4 World Series in, I think, 5 years or 6 years, and he never got to be a part of any of that. So amazing that he's had the long career, played 14 years with the Yankees. He was a coach with them. He was a coach with the Dodgers. He was the manager of the Dodgers, 2 of the winningest teams, I think the 2 winningest teams of all time, met in the World Series last year. Don Mattingly, involved in more than 5,000 games, 5,200 and something, over the course of all those years, dating back to 1982, has never, ever been involved in a World Series game. That will change tonight, and as he told Dan Patrick the other day, he's got some real emotions about that.
Different phases of that. Obviously, earlier as a player, you always feel like you're going to get there. Always felt like we were going to win it. You know, any level that I've ever been, we've won, and I always felt like we were going to win. In New York, as a player, I felt that way. As a coach, I felt that way. A coach in LA, I felt that way. Miami maybe had 1 year there. We had a little run, but it wasn't quite as good as I would have liked there. So, yeah, I've always felt like I was going to get there and have a chance to win.
What's it like now to have a younger son? I think you have 3 grown boys, but now a younger son watching dad on the big stage in a World Series.
It's been a lot of fun watching him go through this. And the difference, I think, with my older boys, you know, we never got on this run. So they didn't do this, you know, extra month of baseball where you get to go and you get to have the celebrations and you get to go through, you know, losing the first couple of games here and having to, you know, have some must-win games in different spots on the road. But to have him go through it and kind of see his love of baseball grow. And that's what's been kind of fun this year is he's just really kind of gotten into baseball. You know, Kirk hits a couple homers. The next thing you know, Louis wants to be a catcher, you know, and then it's like, okay, this is great. You know, so it's been fun to watch him go through it.
But go back, and this is what, 95 when you hurt your back, or you have to make that decision that you're going to retire. And how old are your boys then? Like, if it doesn't happen, you're going to continue to play for a little while longer. And that team was going to World Series, so you may have held on even longer, but you wouldn't have been at home with your boys at that time. So I don't know. Can you look at it as a blessing that you did get hurt and then you retired so you could be at home?
100%. I feel like I had a choice at that point in 95. And I was actually starting, I finally had kind of found a routine, you know, with my back that I was able to start to figure out, okay, I can play, do this much work, and I stay fairly healthy, right? So that part I'd kind of figured out, but the family part I couldn't figure out because all I was doing in 95 and really 94, I probably would have retired after 94 if the strike didn't come along. All I was doing, Dan, was in Jersey. The kids weren't really coming anymore. They were at an age where they were starting to play Little League, and they didn't want to come to New York and sit around and do nothing. So all I was doing off the road was I'd go home, I'd go to the bedroom, I'd go down to the kitchen, grab a cup of coffee, and go to the ballpark and rinse and repeat every day. And that just wasn't enough at that point. And for me, so the baseball part I still loved. I still felt like I was starting to get where I could produce again. But that other side of it, like the thought of my boys, me trying to play more and not being a part of their lives, I just couldn't do that. And I'm so glad I did what I did. And because I don't think they would have known me near as well if I would have kept playing. And yeah, I lost out, you know. At the end of the day, I didn't get rings I may have had a chance for. But I would not change it at one bit.
That's Don Mattingly. No regrets about walking away prior to the Yankees going on that World Series run that they had. And now, finally, as a coach of the Blue Jays, he is going to be participating in his first World Series game. He's been in Major League Baseball since 1982. Player, coach, manager. And it finally happens for him tonight. I also talked earlier this month about the 60th anniversary of Sandy Koufax not pitching on Yom Kippur to start the World Series for the Dodgers, and what an enormous deal that was. Here's how much pitching has changed. The starting pitcher for the Blue Jays tonight is Trey Yesavage. Who, you say? Trey Yesavage is 22 years old. He was a first-round pick by the Blue Jays in 2024. A year ago, went through 4 levels of minor league baseball this year, didn't make his major league debut until September 15th. 2 weeks to go in the season, and now he's going to be the starting pitcher in Game 1 of the World Series. Now, the way things work these days, he could have a lead after 3 innings, and they'll take him out because, that's the way things work. But what an enormous deal it was for the ace of the Dodgers not to start the World Series 60 years ago and not participate because of his Jewish faith and the fact that he wanted to be an example and did not pitch on Yom Kippur. And now you have the Blue Jays going with a kid. He a month ago, right? No, it was late October. So a month and a half ago, he's in the minor leagues. And a month and a half later, he's starting Game 1 of the World Series, the first time that the Blue Jays have been in the World Series since 1993. And they're handing the ball to a 22-year-old kid who is a draft pick out of East Carolina in July of 2024. I mean, it's just a whole different world when it comes to pitching. And, maybe he's going to be able to do it. Maybe he'll be everything that they're looking for in this. But this is a guy who is going to be facing another newbie tonight as Roki Sasaki, who will be pitching for the Dodgers. He hasn't pitched much this year and has been used in relief as well. Who in the right mind would have thought that this would be the way the World Series would kick off? But it's a whole new world in the game of pitching in Major League Baseball. Game 1 of the World Series tonight. All right, Bram is coming up next. He'll probably have some more to say about that, plus the Commanders game on Monday night. I will see you back here Monday morning at 9 a.m.